regular meeting for the month of October for the Co-op Budget Committee. The agenda was posted more than 24 hours in advance, as is required. I'd like to introduce myself, Darlene Mann, and the Budget Committee members who are present for this evening's meeting. Tom Enright, Cindy Van Conant, Raul Blanchet, Matt McGuire, and Lauren Ridstrom. Brian Rader and Dave Flynn have excused absences for this evening, and I'd also like to introduce our BA, Kelly Sealy. So if you would all please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So for tonight's meeting, I'll ask if there are any agenda adjustments. Seeing none, I'll move on to our appointment of process observer, which would have been Brian for this evening, but he isn't here. He's attending the readout, the presentation that the committee, the Brookline Budget Committee is presenting tonight to the select board, because that the town was looking at developing a budget committee instead of the finance committee, so he's at the readout for that this evening. So Cindy, if you wouldn't mind stepping in, that would be great. Approval of minutes. Matt, you posted his last set of minutes. Going forward, we'll have, I'm sorry, what's Dawn's last name?
McMillan.
She'll be doing our minutes going forward. So Matt did share the minutes of the September meeting. Raul, I know that you had some amendments and some minor changes. Was everyone CC'd?
No, just send it back to him so he can.
Okay, so but you didn't send out a revised. Okay, no. So why don't we hold those minutes until the November meeting, so that everyone gets a chance to read the amendments and changes. And we can move right on through public input and move right into general business. And I think in record-breaking time this evening, and we can talk through the monthly results that Kelly sent out to us before we proceed into a discussion of the budget, preliminary guidance, and the school board update.
So you all have received the printout for the end of year, June 30th, 2020. And you can see that we have savings in almost every category. I would say most of that is due to COVID-related concerns, and then other things that were happening from the year were some unfilled positions. These would be things that happened before COVID arrived. We had a lot of hiring savings, and we had some interim positions that were much lower in salary than the people that held those positions normally. We had significant savings in benefits, which is part COVID, part unfilled positions and hiring savings. The only place that we really had a deficit was in the site improvements, and that's mostly related to the tech ed upgrades that we made based on upgrading the tech ed program. So, and the end result of that is a return to the taxpayers, or an offset to the tax rate of $1,125,000, and that is good news.
So that's a little bit higher than what you
yes,
shared with us
I
the last
conservatively
time.
predicted $900,000-ish. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. As we kind of move through this whole process, a couple of months ago, I shared with everyone an unreserved fund balance summary and what the impact is to each community. So I'll update that with this latest information. We'll have that
great.
kind of as we move through this process. So does anyone have any other questions at this point on that? No? Okay.
So there wasn't, one of the files had an original cost of $1,678,922, And I
Well,
guess
that's the expenses.
that's the actual expenses, right?
Well, the balance of the
This-
expenses.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah.
And then you factor in the revenues,
Yep,
and you're left with the 1,125,000.
Right,
Okay.
once we put together everything that's set aside for, to be funded through the unreserved fund balance and things like that.
Right, okay,
Okay.
yes, obviously,
The retained fund balance is a little bit higher, we maxed out the 1%,
yes,
given kind of
yes,
the environment that we're in.
yes, we did.
So what was that number now?
189,000, it was up from 142. Okay, we'll mention the good news. From a state level, there's a preliminary a financial award that's going to be granted to every district in the state of $200 per student to address COVID-related expenses through the pandemic. So we're waiting for authorization to each town and everything, but it was announced and confirmed that we're going to be every community on a per student basis will see $200 per student. So it is not tied to federal funding, it's state level funding, is not tied to any other grant or percentages or previous money we received. We don't have really any conditions to spending it. It's COVID related expenses, but it isn't, we're not receiving it because we received Title I funding or don't receive Title I funding or didn't receive a lot of CARES funding. It's just a blanket $200 per student.
so would that be 200 times roughly 1,200?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that, okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for that. One of the things, actually, I'll make a slight agenda adjustment before we jump into the it's related to the FY22 budget, but I forgot to include the SAU budget. So we can talk a little bit about the SAU budget because there's going to be a follow-up meeting on that in the upcoming weeks. So we could just move right now into the FY22 budget overview. We'll add SAU into that discussion. I did receive an email from the superintendent today with his apologies for not being able to attend tonight. He has another commitment with another meeting, and wanted to just mention that the view that we had of the budget is a second round view. The initial round came in with around $1 million worth of increases from the two schools, so they've submitted to us in the file I shared with everyone a round 2 view with 2 additional rounds to go. We typically see kind of 4 rounds as we go through the budget, and the only other item, Kelly will speak to the new items and whatnot, but the other thing, and I know she'll speak to the issue we brought up over the last couple months about treating the athletics trust through a revolving account as opposed to through the unreserved fund balance. So it was something the superintendent wanted us to consider as we move through the process. So those are the things that he kind of brought forward in his correspondence to me. So, Kelly, if you'd like to just kind of give us a little overview of where we are, some of the goals and things like that, and you'll kind of open up the discussion and move into the preliminary guidance and all of that as we
Okay, and I'm using the new item spreadsheet that you also received, but you received it within the spreadsheet of the trend file, as we call it.
Right,
So.
I did send everyone a revised file earlier today that had some more information for guidance. It didn't change any of the budget trend, the new items, or the superintendent's view or anything like that.
Okay, so round 2, and we always, I think everyone's getting used to how we do the rounds, including our staff as well. But we break it into personnel, academics, computers, maintenance, things like that. So starting off with personnel, we are adding a new case manager to the high school. This person is actually employed right now. We found that we have newer staff and just the need of the students is higher at this point. So that person was hired this year, so we'll need to add it to the budget. We also have a placeholder for an SRO increase. The town of Hollis has applied for, and they are hoping to get a grant that will actually fund a community officer, and part of that person's duties will be in the Hollis School District at Hughes and HPS. So that means that now we have been splitting that cost between the two districts, but now that full cost will come to the co-op as long as that grant is in effect.
So what are the responsibilities of this community officer?
You would have to ask the town for the sure on that. I just know a piece of it is the Hollis School District.
Okay. And what does SRO stand for?
School Resource Officer.
Okay, all right.
So because he won't be focused on those schools anymore,
Right.
The entire cost shifts.
Right,
to our
the
district.
entire cost shifts, as well as the attention, which I don't think is a bad thing.
No.
And then, once we get the USDA wellness policy updates through all three school boards, we'll need a person in each school to manage the goals that that policy sets forth. So we're proposing a stipend in each school of $500 for that. Then we have shared positions as well for both schools, and there were 4 last year. We were able to get the nurse substitute funded in the budget for this year, which has been a godsend with the COVID issues that we face, that our nurses face every day, that have them somewhat overwhelmed. So that is a great addition. So we're hoping to fund hopefully at least one of these positions for FY22. Moving to academics, we usually pull out all of the textbooks that are over $5,000. We don't include the language arts, but otherwise these are the textbooks that are on the docket, so to say, for FY22. And the algebra books are sort of a phase 2. I should have written that in there. We did buy some last year, and we're going to buy another set of them this year. The lab table replacement is another request from the high school. Rick thinks those tables that are currently there arrived with the building of the high school. So
how many tables is that?
I didn't ask him. That's a good question. All right. The high school also is looking to purchase a soprano sax, and then the performing arts team is looking to renew a subscription to Soundtrap. I believe if anyone watched their online theater productions during the spring, this was part of this particular software has helped them do that, as well as a few other pieces of equipment. Moving to the middle school, they are looking to fund the Shakespeare guest speaker, which is a traditional curriculum activity that is really embedded in their curriculum. So they'd like to move that from being parent paid to having the district pay for that curriculum piece. The middle school is also looking to purchase social studies textbooks and science textbooks, and for grade 7. And then the 598 Sibelius, I think is how you say that, is an online subscription for the music teachers. We used to have that in place in all of the machines that were in the music department, but they've decided that they really just need it for the teachers, so we'd like to get that renewed. And our new equipment in the tech ed department, the laser machine, the warranty expires, so we'd like to get that put in place for FY22. On to new, and you guys can stop me at any time if you have questions. The new computer equipment you see listed for the high school is phase 2 of Rick's tech plan, and it's all Chromebooks, and we're hitting social studies, science, which is biology and chemistry, and world language, as well as carts to go with those. Now get ready for the next one. There is nothing in the middle school. So that was pretty shocking, but happy to see.
So nothing needs to be replaced?
No,
I probably
well,
just
no,
should just let that go and not
nothing
ask,
new.
but
It's nothing
Okay,
new,
that's
but
true.
if you
This is
turn the
not
page,
replacement.
there are replacements, yes. Okay, so in both schools, we're looking to replace staff laptops, 10 in the high school, 11 in the middle school, staff desktops in the middle school, which would be here in the library, at least one of them, and then 3 would be in the main office for the administrative staff there. There's a printer here in the library that I think the repairman, there's only one repairman in the United States that knows how to fix this machine, and we happen to have that person handy.
Do we have an overall, like, a service contract among all 6 of the schools?
Yes.
That we do?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. It's a print management contract as well. So the only thing we actually have to purchase are staples. Everything is under that contract for, well, paper. We have to purchase paper, but all repairs are under that. Let's see, we have projectors in both buildings, 10 in the high school and 3 in the middle school, and those are in the middle school, there's 3 for the regular cycle replacements when machines go down, and 6 in the high school. And then the math department is requesting 10 for all of their teachers. And their time is pretty much nearing an end as well. The math department is also requesting 10 staff laptops. Their machines need a little bit more of the graphics capabilities, so theirs are a little bit more costly than the regular staff laptops. And they are also requesting smart boards, 2 of them, to start the replacement cycle for the math department. And I already got this. Oh, the student desktops, I misspoke. That was staff desktops. One of them is here in the library, but as far as student desktops go, there are 4 here in the library. And then we have Chromebooks for both the high school and the middle school, and these are end-of-life Chromebooks. We've recently discovered that there is an end-of-life to Chromebooks, and they are not supported after 5 years. So these are the Chromebooks right now we anticipate replacing, but this is really a worst-case scenario because we have Chromebooks out in the community. Some are going to come back damaged, some are going to not come back, and and we've also ordered a number of them, but they're on back order. So when all is said and done, we'll have a closer number in mid-year as to what that really looks like.
Okay, with all the shift to remote learning and kind of loaning out Chromebooks and stuff to students, did that kind of have an impact here where we need more, I guess, computers to cover?
Well, I don't think we need more at this point, other than the fact that they're back ordered and we don't have them, some of them. But I think we were able to jump on this really early, like in, I want to say it was May, that we were able to purchase Chromebooks ahead of time and also use our CARES Act money. That's what we used, all of that money for every district for Chromebooks. So I think we're in a good place right now.
So as we work our way through the phasing and the replacement, is the expectation that students won't need to bring their Chromebooks to school? For those that are in
Their
school?
personal ones,
Yeah.
you mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think we're headed in that direction, but I don't know that we've made that as the plan, so to
Right,
speak.
right.
I think they want to wait until we get through a year of how we've been doing it and evaluate if that's the way we want to go, so that every student has their own and we supply it, or if it works the way it is. Okay.
So quick question. With the COVID situation right now, and some percentage of the class learning from home, they
Yes.
still would need the Chrome to learn from home, correct? So the
Yes.
assumption is everyone should have a Chromebook and use it for like their 4 years in high school.
Well, or their own device. Many
Or-
students have their own devices that they use at home. And then those that don't have those devices, we've supplied them a Chromebook.
So what is the percentage of students that have a
Oh,
school
boy.
supplied device?
I don't have that figure.
Okay.
I think it's a fairly significant amount, though. Okay, then on to shared services and software. We only have one thing there this year so far, and that is filtering software. And this software will be pushed out to Chromebooks that we own to work at home so that there's filtering, just like you would have in the school, you would have it at home as well. Parents have expressed a desire for that. I'm sure that's not the only reason, but that is.
So that's the only software we're looking at. Our Zoom is free. We don't, we're on the free version.
We are on the free
Zoom.
version, although we recently purchased a small amount. I want to say it's 20, so we can, there's better, higher level features when you purchase some licenses. So we've recently purchased, I think it's 20, to allow the elementaries to have breakout rooms and things like that. So right now, as long as Zoom is free, we'll continue to use it that way. Okay, and there is actually a rumor that the DOE is going to purchase Zoom licenses, so we'll see if that comes to fruition.
That is a rumor.
Huh?
That is a rumor, as opposed to the $200 per student.
Yes. Oh, that is not a rumor, definitely. But Rich found that out when he was asking about Zoom, so I don't know how accurate it is. But all right, then moving to safety issues, we have proposed a camera for the turf field, mostly for safety reasons. I'm sure it could come in handy for other things, but that's the prime purpose.
Just one camera or a camera system? So
It's one camera, and the way that it's been designed by the installers, it will cover most of the field. Yeah, camera technology is pretty amazing. It's actually would be installed with antennas. So
will that be infrared as well?
Would that be what?
24/7 infrared?
Or
just in the day?
I believe it is, but I did not ask that question.
Will it be set up such that you can use it to record games?
That I'm not sure.
That was mentioned last night at the school board
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah, 'cause that would
I
be
think
very...
they think it's going to be, I mean,
Okay.
that's one of the plans too as well.
Right.
And I would assume that the police station will have a camera view of the whole field as well, right?
Yeah, I would assume they have the views of our other cameras, so. Okay, and then in the middle school, the nurses are looking to have 2 extra EpiPens on hand because there's a lot of traveling that happens, field trips and whatnot, and they'd like to have those go with them. And Tim is also looking to get handheld radios for the staff, 15 of them. Okay, so in athletics, Brian is proposing this. It may be affected by what we end up doing with the athletic fees, but right now I think there are 6, I want to say, sports, I think I mentioned this before, that are sort of outside the athletic fees. One of them is skiing, one of them is swimming, there's bowling, hockey, tennis, and maybe one other. I'm not sure, Cindy, but anyway, so he would like to bring all of those into the district budget, and there is a cost associated with doing that for each one, but they would also be part of the athletic fees that we collect, which they are not now. So that would be somewhat offset.
So I'm sorry, they're not part of, these sports aren't part of the athletic fees now?
No, those 6 athletic sports are not. The parents are paying for the fees that they incur for whatever sport it is.
So the proposal would be to bring this in and charge the fees?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, then moving on to facilities and maintenance, and none of these have been placed in the maintenance trust at this time. We'll decide that as we go on later to see which ones are going to stay in and those that leave. The high school will do another roof section, that would be section 4. There are masonry repairs in the patio area and on the curbs that need to be made. There's another section of road paving that they'd like to do. That would be from where it ends up to around the corner somewhat. However, I'm not exactly sure what their endpoint is, but that would be another section. And the HVAC system in the high school is using the Windows 7 machine, and it definitely needs an upgrade. So that is on the docket. And in our engineering classrooms, they have the new engineering computers, so they'd like to install air conditioning in there to protect those computers. And
Excuse me, I thought the security upgrade at the office, I might be mistaken and confused, but I thought that the discussion around that last year, I thought that was a high priority.
well, it is a high priority, but it also has a high price tag. So I think Andy would like to have the paving done first, because there are issues. And part of, I didn't mention this, but part of that paving would be to widen that section so that we can get emergency and first responders around carpool.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Kelly, because the first round, it says second lane, and then it's not in the second round.
I know,
but I'm
I see
assuming
that.
it is still second lane?
Yeah, that didn't change. I just didn't get that copied over.
Okay.
I just saw that myself. So, and then the engineering, the air conditioning, the engineering room. Then we have window blinds, screens, and seals. You've seen those before, and we want to keep those going until they are completed. There's a request for a storage shed. It may be located on the turf field or not, but that's primarily to hold some of the outdoor gear that we have for winter and whatnot. Then to the middle school, I think this is the last round of tables and chairs that they want to put in the MPR to complete that set. They also would like to upgrade the security systems here in this building, the alarms. The dispatchers in the town, I think, are really excited about this because our alarms go off at very odd times for no apparent reason, so that needs to be repaired or replaced. And we would like to get the HVAC preventative maintenance contract. The high school has that, so we'd like to get that down here as well. And finally, the building systems evaluation is more of looking at our systems as kind of how we did over the summer with also an eye on energy efficiencies. So that is what that one is, sorry. Excuse me. And lastly is phase 2 of the window replacement here in the middle school. The far end of the building is in need of replacement of windows. They're not sealing properly and they don't close properly. They get stuck. So there's a lot of issues with those windows that need to be replaced.
What's the difference between roof replacement on that page and then the phase 4 roof replacement?
The one on this page would be the middle school, and the one on the previous page would be the high school.
Yeah.
So I kind of flew through that. Do you guys have any questions? Wow.
All right. Paul, I'm sure we'll come up with something.
I'm sure you will.
So all of that, all the new items and information you just went through are in the round 2 budget view that's provided in this document. And as that summary indicates on the bottom, the HEA and HESA contracts are going through the negotiation process, so we don't have estimates or anything in place for those as well.
Correct.
Okay. So, all of those things combined with the increases to NHRS, our GMR that's estimated at 10.9% increase. I'm not sure what year of this transportation contract we're in. Third year of the transportation contract. And adjustments, changes, and things like needs as indicated in special education. And all the other budget elements bring us to a total budget view excluding CBAs of $25,849,637, which is a 3.89% increase over the current budget. So, and that's as I said, a full view excluding contracts. If you're looking at just the operating budget component, so the piece that goes on the operating budget warrant article itself, that totals $24,474,563 as compared to our operating budget of about $23.6 million last year, which is a 3.8% increase. So all of that information was incorporated into two spreadsheets at the beginning of the file, which is put together to address our guidance. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it, I have hard copies of those 2 pages here.
Can I see it? Yeah.
Sure.
Could I ask, how's the $240,000 COVID grant going to be managed?
I'm sure it will be offsetting the costs that we've already incurred, which we have many, in addition to personnel costs, which we will also have. We've had to hire a number of people to manage the teaching remotely and in person.
So that's something you'll report at some point?
Yes, at some point. I mean, we're crazy behind right now, but yes, at some point after we get the money, I'd like to create a report that shows that income.
I mean, just your verbal is helpful.
Okay, I can do that.
Just so I sort of have a feel.
Okay, I don't have that information right now.
Yeah, no,
I can tell you.
thank you. That's fine.
Okay, so the first page that I handed out is our normal general format that we've been using for preliminary guidance. The second page includes a little bit of an additional section that just gets to the guidance multiplier, and it is a little expansion of the calculation based on a view Tom Guillen and I have been working on to bring some consistency between how we're addressing that multiplier between the two boards, between the Hollis Budget Committee, which they're going to use as they're evaluating both the town and the school district budgets. So, and it gets to the same point that we've talked about for the past couple of years, which is how to address. What we do is start with the initial budget. We take out some items which you would consider fixed or non-negotiable or to be negotiated separately items. We come up with a guidance base, which we have in the past, I would say probably 3, 4, maybe 4 or 5 years, and further back, just taken a CPI or some view of CPI, applied that, and said that's kind of the level of the increase we would attach to the budget. We add back some items, and we come up with a guidance estimate. What we started to talk about a few years ago was the fact that incorporated in that guidance base is HEA and HESA salaries, which have their own, which are addressed in their own way through the collective bargaining agreement. So we've had the discussion about how to then take that CPI-based multiplier and make an adjustment to it. So whether we further reduce the guidance base by removing salaries or identify the amount, then identify those salaries and adjust the multiplier itself, it gets you to the same point. So we would either take 15 million, reduce it by 7.6, and apply a full 0.8 to the lower amount, or whatever that percentage is going to be, or we adjust the percentage after consideration of those collective bargaining-based salaries. Either way you look at it, it gets you to the same point. So what I have in here right now is a 0.8% original multiplier, which is CPI-based, makes an adjustment for the salary attributions, and gets that adjusted multiplier down from 0.8 to 0.41. So once that little calculation takes place, they're both carried over to the first page, so you can see.
4.1 or 4.9?
They both are. There's the .8,
Okay.
and then it's adjusted to a .41
Okay, yeah.
right here. They're linked, so if we
Yeah,
make any
yeah.
adjustments, it'll just automatically calculate. And then that's used to identify an increase to the budget, and then we add back the amounts outside of guidance. So in this case, those are things like food service and special revenue, debt service at the new level we're anticipating for FY22, special education as we're anticipating it for FY22, and an NHRS increase. There's space to add additional relief items, and that gets us to our guidance operating budget, and then we add in the additional warrant articles to build back up to that total budget view. So, the other thing that's included on the second page, the one that's smaller, is we talked a little bit at the last meeting about using actuals as the basis for developing preliminary guidance and putting out a guidance view for the budget. So, you know, we talked about some of the issues that are involved with that, because what we have is an FY20 actual, a year that we're in right now, that incorporated some changes that we wouldn't be accounted for if you just took the actuals from last year, COVID-related items that weren't spent and whatnot. And what I did was take our FY20 actuals and I added in 2 adjustments. So the adjustments were for an add back for any FY21 articles. So those are things like we had a higher SAU budget. We had higher transportation costs. We had approved CBAs, things like that. So anything that was a voted in and necessitated change is that 548,122, and the COVID adjustment in there of 950 is after kind of looking at our results that yielded the kind of 1.7 that got us down to the 1.2 million or 1.1 that's being returned to the taxpayer. What portion of that would we have incurred had we been in school? So it's the 950 is after looking at some categories. I ran it by Kelly. We can put more time and effort into figuring out exactly what that amount is, but that was just looking at the categories and putting an estimate to what we would have actually incurred. And what we get from that guidance-based view is a view that is $140,000 different from the guidance base that's calculated off of the way we've been calculating it. And then it rolls through the multiplier, adding back amounts, and kind of gets us to new levels and things like that. That end up with a view that's about $141,000 at an operating budget level, different from the way we've typically calculated things. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So at this point, we can just have a conversation about whether we feel the point 8 is the right place to start, and how we want to go about addressing preliminary guidance, applying that multiplier and the adjustment to the FY21 budget and the adjustments the way we typically do it would yield an operating budget of 24,380,065, which is about $95,000 lower, $94,500 lower than the current view that we have before us. Again, further discussions on impacts of HEA, HESA, shifting the expendable trust, we would need a warrant article on that, how we're addressing the maintenance trust, and all of those things are separate and outside of the operating budget itself, but essentially we would be $94,500 apart on the current, from the current view that we have now.
Okay, so I know you said all this, but,
It's okay.
in the page one,
Uh-huh.
we're not taking out the contracts.
Because they get taken out and adjusted here. So on the second page, I take out all of the HESA and HEA-related salary costs in identifying and evaluating the impact on the multiplier. So the 7.7666192 million is all of the HEA and HESA-related salaries with their CBA impacts.
That sounds low. Is that benefits too?
That is salaries.
Okay. What do we do with benefits? Where are they?
Benefits are still included in that guidance base and subject to the multiplier of 0.41%. And what we've been told is we can expect a 10.9% increase in our rates.
So why did, we've only been doing this 5 years, so I
I
get
know.
confused. So,
I take a deep breath every time I start, like, oh, I hope I can answer their questions.
When you say 10.9%, you mean the NHRS?
No,
No.
that was
Yeah.
that's
Health
the
insurance.
insurance, that's the
The
GMR,
GMR, okay.
guaranteed maximum rate
Okay, all right.
for insurance. NHRS is going up by, to 21.02% for the professional staff and 14.06% for the support staff. So the support staff is like a 25% increase.
Yeah, and the other one is like
And the
18
HA is
or
like
something,
18,
yeah.
yeah, so it's substantial, and those rates are in place for FY '22 and FY '23.
I have a question regarding the 950.
Yeah?
Is there any, since that's a fairly large number,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to understand actually how we derive that number.
So I went into Kelly's file, which I believe I closed.
which number are you looking at, Raul?
The 950 COVID adjustment backup,
Oh, okay.
I
And
wonder
it
if there is
was-
some flexibility in that number.
I mean, there could be, and it would need to, I would defer to Kelly on what that number is. That was me looking at the underruns from last year and saying, okay, we saved on the transportation contract, we would have paid that. And it was me making a judgment on
Okay.
what I thought that would be. So, yeah, there probably is some movement
Okay.
in that, but just using best judgment at the time. So Kelly, if we could look at it again and see
Sure.
if that's in the ballpark, but I looked at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different categories of items, took partial amounts.
So what were some of the other
certain areas.
categories? Transportation is obvious, but
PD was one of them. Let me open Kelly's file. some of the special education savings because we didn't do certain services or because items didn't have to be paid.
So I have a question regarding on special ed. Is anybody from special ed learning from home?
Yes, I believe there are a few.
So there are some transportation costs, for example, that may be lower? Because
Potentially.
they're not traveling, right?
Potentially.
Well, that's for this year. Next year, I don't know that we're necessarily making an assumption that we're continuing with this model.
Correct.
We're assuming, I'm assuming the
Yes.
budget is moving forward, that everyone is
Yes.
100% in school for next year.
Correct.
Maybe this is a sidebar discussion, but.
Well, that's a
chances
management
are-
and operations
Yeah,
discussion
right.
of the model that they plan on moving forward with.
So assuming this year is at 80%, say, chances are next year will be 100%.
Correct.
And we have to
That's how we're budgeting.
We have to
budget
budget- we
for
have to
like a
budget for
100%
that.
model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to at least do an initial back of the envelope calculation to maintain what would it be if we had the same model as now. Because depending on who you speak with, this could last a long time.
Sure. That would be difficult to do, but
I mean, I think
Does-
you would probably end up managing it the same way you're managing this year's budget. You went into it
Right.
never assuming that
Right.
this was the model, and you make it work.
right.
Because you have to.
Exactly. Because, I mean, you may save some money, but you're going to have increasing costs as well. So,
I mean, for example, it would be nice to at least have a tabulation that says, of say, of a dozen items, what are likely to be lower if you had this model versus that model, versus higher. At least for someone to understand what are the drivers for what drives the number up or down, We don't necessarily have to know the amount, we just need to understand what are the, influencing
okay. I thought you were
factors.
talking about knowing amounts and not.
I mean, for example, transportation is an easy one, right?
Is it?
If everybody stays home, no, there's no transportation, right?
If everyone stays home, sure.
But
But we have a
everyone's not
contract.
doing that now.
So-
So,
Right.
and we
But-
do still have a contract,
Right.
so sometimes it doesn't mean we don't pay for things.
Right.
It just means you have to renegotiate to
Right.
determine if you can
Exactly.
pay less, which is what happened in the last quarter. And similarly with our student services, outside contracts
Yep.
for that.
Oh,
and-
yeah. And
And
it's,
the risk to compensatory
Yeah.
services if things aren't provided.
exactly.
Um,
There's a lot of unknowns, and it all comes down to how long you're going to be in remote too, because that dramatically affects the costs.
So I'm not sure I understand the utility of Kelly spending all kinds of time making wild guesses here, there, and everywhere, and putting numbers in front of us. With all due respect, I don't understand that. Where is that getting us?
Right, because ultimately, it isn't this group's decision on how that happens. That's why it's a management decision on how you move forward. And if your view is we move forward at 100%, then that's how we're building the budget. And if we don't move that way, then you have to manage all of those things.
Exactly.
I mean,
Well, you have to
I
have the
agree
money
with,
there to
I
pay for
agree
100%.
with you that I don't want to add any burden to her unnecessarily. But I want to understand what are the 6 or 7 parameters that drove to the 950. That's all.
Okay.
And transportation being one of them, there may be 5 or 6 other factors.
Yeah.
Well, I think athletics is one of them.
Yeah, athletics, transportation, professional
Substitutes.
development, substitutes.
Benefits probably and wages, because there's a lot of stipends, let's say, that we didn't pay. Yeah, so that
Clubs
affects,
and sports and all those things that
yep,
aren't really happening, especially at the middle school. They're just doing an intramural, so I'm
Right.
not sure how much stipend they're using, I
Right.
mean, I just think that we have to go forward like it's 100%, and then if we end up having money left over,
It
like
goes
we
back
did
to
this
the
year, then
taxpayers.
it goes back to the taxpayers. I mean,
Right.
you can't second guess every line item to know what's gonna happen. I mean, and we have to vote on this in March. It's not like we even have a lot of time to make a decision here.
Right, and I would say, given the situation with how we ended FY '20 and because of those unknowns and how you evaluate that, I'm not sure this is the year to consider using adjusted FY20 actuals as the basis for determining
I would
guidance.
very much agree with
So
that.
I think this is a good starting point, and I think it's something we evaluate at the end of FY21, and where it, I don't know, is it hopefully easier? It's hopefully easier because it's,
Maybe.
well, it's a slightly more regular year, so even though you have 20 to 30% of the student population out, you're still paying staff to deliver services, and
Right.
so it comes closer to, we still have to
Closer.
run the same number of bus routes, even though those kids are home.
Yes.
And we hope to be able to do it through the year and things like that.
It's closer, but we're spending more on salaries because we have to hire people for some
That's
of the
true.
activities that we have between remote and
Right, to
here.
have monitors in the classrooms. And
Right,
things like
and we
that.
also have an enormous amount of PPE that we have to purchase and plexiglass, as you see, so.
Mhm.
I
And then we
mean-
have surprising offsets, like $200 per student that no one was expecting.
Right,
So,
exactly.
you know, so that helps offset it, and so
It's hard. It's like needing a crystal ball.
so I'm go ahead, Lloyd.
I wanted to back up the conversation. So to go back to our earlier discussion, that the 0.8 multiplier
Yep,
is based on what inflation rate?
it's on a CPI of 0.8.
0.8, okay, all
Mhm.
right.
I think last year we were at,
I'm not gonna be able to come up with
I
that
don't
one.
think I can remember either. I was gonna say, I remember it was, I wanna say it was under 2, because we did the same type of calculation. It was
think it
in
was
this, it was in
1.1
this
for
file,
some
and I
reason.
deleted it. Actually, if you pull up, Matt, do you have the original file that I sent?
I'm looking for it.
Because if it's that original file, we would see what the multiplier is.
Oh, the one, no, I don't have that one.
You don't have
I was looking for last year's.
It was the one in the first 2 pages were in the first file that I sent out.
No, I only copied down the second.
yeah,
But I'm
same
looking
thing.
for last year's from a year ago's meeting.
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah, I might-
definitely under 2%.
I might have that spreadsheet.
And it was-
I have one from January.
Oh, we might have-
Can I pull up these?
Oh, that's a good idea.
So just, again, so I understand, it's
Mhm.
only been 5 years doing this. The 25,755 is a
Mhm.
3.5% increase
Yes,
request of everything other than the excluded items in HESA. And the
the 25,755 is the Budget Committee's calculated view, other than HEA and HESA. 25,849,638 is the total superintendent's view, round 2.
okay, so, and that 3.9%
Yeah.
request,
Mm-hmm. Excluding the CBAs,
excluding what?
the collective bargaining agreements.
Yeah, okay.
It was 0.72.
It was 0.72, so we took about 1.5 and ended up. Thank you.
Mhm.
So our starting point last year was about 1.5, and we ended up at 0.72. This year it's at 0.8, we're ending up at 0.4 as a multiplier, like an inflation adjustment to the budget, to the prior year guidance base.
I'm sorry, Darlene.
Okay,
So what do you mean we've ended up at a 3.5% increase without the contracts? I mean,
that.
who has ended up there?
No, I'm saying that's what all of this adds up to. So, using the 0.8% CPI,
Yep,
adjusting it in half, adding in that 64,000, adding back
oh, okay.
those items.
Okay, all right.
We end up at a operating budget view of 24,380,065, and adding in the estimates for the additional warrant articles. So we have an operating budget article, and then we have the additional warrant articles that we usually bring to the meeting. HEA and HESA are not calculated or estimated yet. So it brings using the preliminary guidance calculation, the budget committee's view of a total budget would be 25,755,140. The superintendent's round 2 view is 25,849,638. That's just in total. So we kind of address all those lower elements later. So on an operating budget view of what's going to, trying to close some things, what's going to be in the operating budget article, we're at 24.3, if you go onto the bottom summary.
Yep.
Budget committee, and I can relabel these just to make it more clear, would be at 24,380,065, and the superintendent or district co-op view is 24,474,563, which is a difference of $94,498.
Versus the column on the right, which starts out with actuals for FY20.
Yes.
And after taking everything out and adding the fudge factors back in again, it's roughly 235,032
Right.
instead of 94,498 difference.
Right. So it would be, that view has us at 24, that's the second page of the spreadsheet, the guidance multiplier calculation.
I apologize for calling it a fudge factor.
Thank you, I appreciate
This was a
that.
very good estimate.
That would put us at 24, the budget committee view at 24 of the operating budget, 24,239,531, and that's a $235,000 difference.
So it's roughly $140,000 difference from
Yes.
the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Given that our guidance gives us a 3.5% increase, I don't like it. We got a 1% inflation rate.
Yeah, but we have
But we have-
18% increase
Well, I know
in
there's, obviously it's driven by factors we can't control.
Yeah.
So we gotta control something else. We're gonna go to the taxpayers and tell them we got a 1% inflation and we got a 3.5% budget increase.
The special education.
Or more with contracts.
The special education increase is,
I thought it was significant.
yeah, it is, there's time. Is almost $350,000.
Well, I know, I mean, I look at all the things we can't control, but 3.5% increase is a big increase.
On the other hand, we have to give the school system, the superintendent and his staff credit for returning almost $1.2 million back to the district.
Yeah, no argument.
The NHRS increase, you can see, is just checking the number. Yeah, it's 300,000 there as well. And so we have a $300,000 increase in NHRS, a $350,000 increase in special education. Debt service goes down slightly, and we are looking at $195,000 increase in insurance that ends up being offset by other savings. So while there was a $195,000 increase in health and dental, the district's also recognizing, I think, an $80,000 difference to Kelly and Lane changes.
Yeah, that
And,
was.
as offset, so there are offsets in the budget. It's not that, this addresses those major areas where we have recognized in the past, we have to take the NHRS increase. We recognize the needs for special education, but I want to recognize as well, there are savings spread throughout the budget, like professional development is $105,000 lower. This year as a result of eliminating PD stipends from the contract.
Correct.
So there's that reduction. There's the lane change reduction of $80,000. So there are some, categories throughout the budget that offset some of those increases. And I think the other thing Andy mentioned in his note was to consider relief items, like for guidance relief, with NHRS and GMR. And I would say, being $95,000 apart, I don't think we need to consider relief for GMR, because I think you could easily close a $95,000 gap. Well, not easily, but you could close a $95,000 gap. And potentially close it deeper than that.
I see that, yeah.
So that can almost cover the $140,000 difference between what they're asking versus starting from the baseline and adding and subtracting all those parameters, those values.
What do you mean?
Well, if you look at these two numbers,
Yeah.
the difference between what the superintendent is asking versus what the number shows based on starting with the actuals for FY20 is what,
235,000.
Yeah, right. So it's not that far apart, really.
Not if you accept the 3.5.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is changing the subject a little bit, but what's Kelly, do you know what the health of Health Trust is, given COVID? Because their reserves were restricted by the state.
Right, we're actually getting a contribution holiday, or whatever they call it, this fiscal year.
So Health Trust is healthy
Yes,
financially?
yes.
Oh, excellent, okay. I was worried that it would be the opposite.
No, they seem to have money they want to give to the world, so.
I just want to run through.
So has there been an estimate on the expenses related to PPE equipment and?
I have a number, but we're not done yet, so.
Okay.
We're only in
Can you give
second
us a tip of
month.
the iceberg?
I don't know it. I didn't look at that before I left,
okay,
so
no problem.
I don't know it.
So our FY19 budget increase was this is total budget, was 2.3%. Our FY20 budget increase was 7.3. Our FY21 was 1.86. And without contracts, right now we're between 3.5, 3.5 from a budget committee view.
And contracts, refresh my memory, are typically 1% for teachers, is that about, and not much at all for I mean, we can figure in contracts another 1%, is that ballpark?
I don't remember that last time I made that calculation, but
That's what
it's probably
my
similar.
recollection.
Yeah, it probably.
Support staff isn't much,
No.
peanuts.
Yeah, probably 1 to, I mean, if, I could just put a place, if I were to add, like, the last year of the HESA contract and the last year of the, last CBA.
I think Hess is 55,000 for this year.
I thought it was 80.
Oh, I think I'm.
I'm not suggesting that
Sorry.
you do it on paper, but I mean, for discussion purposes, there's another 1% coming.
Right,
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
say.
Yeah, 1 to 1.25.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. So that gets us to the around 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any flexibility in the in the budget for maintenance trusts?
Oh, this is round 2.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
they're, you know, they would go back, and I think, you know, another area to look at, and I know we've had such, nonlinear changes in GMR, that it's hard to go back and say what have we actually realized? Because I would say in the last 5 years, we've had positive, like 2 to 3%, minus 1%, flat, 6 to
Yeah,
8% last
something
year,
like
this
that.
year, something like that, and then 10.9%.
Yeah.
So if there's a way to go back and look at what we were told versus what we realized, and if, you know, there's a way to consider not taking the full 10.9% and making it something less than, like closer to 9 to 9.5.
That's a little scary.
But I would say and it's just, this is just from memory, that we might not have realized what we were told, because that's a guaranteed maximum. It
Right.
often comes in
No,
lower than.
but there have been years
And
that
if
it was
you
on,
can't
too.
see a trend because you're looking at it, then that's good information
Sure.
for us to have, that, you know, we can't see the trend, and it came in at -1, it came in at 0, it came in right where they told us for the past 4 years, then we take the 10.9. But if there's some type of.
I think usually they do better than the GMR. I think you're right, but I don't know if
you're
there's
right.
a trend.
There have been years that we were spot on, and then most years are not. They're less, definitely, but some are significantly less, and some of them are very close, yeah.
No, I know it's a crapshoot,
Yeah.
but we're trying here.
We appreciate that.
So now looking at the totals too, if we took out the expendable trust, that reduces the budget by 67,000. Is that because we're moving it to a revolving fund?
The maintenance, you mean?
No,
Oh,
the athletics
Oh,
trust.
the athletics.
If we were to consider managing that a different way.
I'm not sure what the first year looks like of doing that. I haven't
Okay.
talked to the DRA yet, but
Okay.
we may be stuck with that for the first year, and then
Okay.
wouldn't in
Yeah,
the
that would
second.
be good to know.
Yeah, I just haven't got to that one
Yeah,
yet.
no, that's okay. That's all right. We focused on the operating budget, so that's good.
And Darlene, is this SAU budget assessment based on the SAU budget that you guys discussed?
Thank you. That is based on the current SAU budget. We can have a conversation about that. So that is based on the,
It's an estimate, though, what's in here. It's not, I did not make that calculation yet.
okay, let me just pull up. I thought I had it open. Oh, right, because this is the full view and you haven't allocated it yet.
Yeah, I haven't.
But is it based on?
Yeah, I think I want to say it's an 8% increase, which is roughly what we had in the SAU budget at one point.
Right, it's a little bit, yeah. So right now, there are, I should have shared them, I apologize, I will share them after the meeting. There's a 2% and a 3% CPI view of the SAU budget. because the contracts of the staff at the SAU office, their increases are contracted to between 2 and 4%, based on CPI. So the lowest increase per the contract would be 2%, despite the fact that CPI is significantly below that right now. So the current budget view for the SAU budget is so the total expense view is $1,948,717, which is about $135,000 increase, which is around 7.4%, because the governing board has not made a decision or recommendation on the use of fund balance to offset some of that expense. That 7.4% increase goes up to 9% because they wouldn't be using any fund balance, and in looking at FY21, they were anticipating using fund balance for part of the FY21 budget. So that brings us down to $1,944,717 versus a budget for this year of $1,783,100, which is a 161% increase. So the calculated budget is $135,000 more, but because the funding mechanism changes, $161,000 more needs to be collected in taxes and distributed to the.
Because the fund balance was lower than they thought?
Yeah, the fund balance, they like to keep it between 7 and 10%. Right now, it's in the 7. It's right hovering around 7%. So they wouldn't anticipate using the fund balance unless, as we approach like the end of the year.
So was some of that because it was used in the prior year?
Yeah. So and there's less to add to it because of how the budget
right.
closes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the budget, the SAU budget itself. There are no new staff members. It does the facilities director was hired after the full year, so maybe is like at 10 and a half or 11 months in this budget, but it's a full 12 months in the next budget. Again, the same type of NHRS increases, GMR increases, and it really becomes a salary and benefit contract. There's no changes to no increases to professional development. Are you doing the shed?
The shed is in there.
So there's a shed in this view for storage because they had to move some of the files and things that are in the SAU office to make an office space for the facilities director. So there's a shed in here, and I will share it with everyone. It's not markedly different from the view I previously shared, except that this view is a 2% increase, and the original view had a 3% increase.
And
so
I think it had 8% for health insurance.
Right, it did,
Yeah.
instead of the 10.9.
But this amount is in the increase, the overall increase that we're talking about now.
Yes, but Kelly hasn't done the final allocation.
Right.
I understand
But
that.
yes,
We're
but it's
still
in
at
there.
5%.
Mhm.
Okay. So I can appreciate Lauren's concern that 5% is higher than we want to be. I'm not sure that I'm going to throw a number out, but we gotta take it below 5%, in my opinion.
Okay, so if I were,
How's the special ed trust now? Are we close to the cap where we want to keep that?
Oh.
And then if we are close, I know it's early in the year, but so we probably don't know if we're gonna end up using anything from there. But
At this point, I've not heard that we would go to that in this district. And I think it's at 180,000 right now. So we had always said that 225 was how far we would go with that.
kind of close.
Mm-hmm.
So are we sitting around trying to figure out, I mean, I've delivered my message, I'm kind of finished, I don't know where everyone else is.
Okay, I wanted to just run a view.
Well, she's running a view. I agree. We have to get lower, below 5%,
So Kelly's
But-
got her message, what else can we do?
But, like she said, we still
So-
have 2 rounds to go to,
Yes.
Yeah,
So essentially, to get to, assuming a 1 and a little bit percent, we would basically be saying there's no multiplier to the budget. So that $64,000 that we would have been calculated is eliminated. That would bring the operating budget down to 3.1%.
And that doesn't include any making adjustments to the 950,000.
No, because I'm not using that view. I'm using the budget view, not the actual
Okay.
view. So that would be a difference of 159,000. Right, because it was 95, added another 65. So that would be 100, that would mean the school district would need to reduce its operating budget view by 160,000, and that would get us to a 3.1% operating budget change.
Okay, well, that's not my number.
Okay, I'm just,
Okay.
I'm sharing that's
Okay.
where we would be with a multiplier of 0.
What's your number?
I don't have a number. And I understand there's certain expenses we have no control over. But there are expenses we have control over, and if you're running a business and there's expenses you can't control, you cut the other expenses. And so,
Well, it seems like where we have some room, maybe we'll defer adding 45,000 to the SPED fund, reserve fund. Or maybe we will not set aside, do the roof, this year, I don't know. I mean, those are areas where there seems to be potentially maybe some play.
So right now, we also have $200,000 identified for the maintenance trust, but all of those items are in the operating
Yes.
budget. So
There's definitely
some
something
of
we'll
that,
do.
so there might be some of that shifting.
Yep.
But if it's currently in the operating budget, then we need to evaluate, well, would we put $200,000 in an expendable trust, or would we reduce that by $100,000? To Matt's point about the special education trust, is this the year we say, you know what, even if we're not at the maximum, it just might not be the year to fund it because NHRS is a 20% increase.
Right.
So we're not doing that this year. And if there's any way to if we move to that revolving account and you can take 67,000 out, right there we've taken $200,000 out of the non-operating budget, parts of the budget, but you would still need to go back and look at the operating budget pieces of the budget.
Right.
To close that gap. So
so
there are 2 ways to close the percentage growth. We're looking for you to close it on the operating budget side, but there's also movement on the other side as well.
well, to play devil's advocate, maybe there's things we can't do. And it sounds like we're just moving dollars around.
No, what I just said is actually reducing it on both sides. So
Right.
they would have to still, if the multiplier were 0, they would have to close a $159,000 gap before they get to the other articles. So we close 159,000, and then if that 159,000 includes all of the facilities maintenance, we don't need to put $200,000 into a maintenance trust. We can take another 100,000 off. We can take $25,000 off to the trust, and potentially, I'll say half of the expendable trust because for athletics, because we're moving it and managing it a different way. So that's 160,000 plus another 150,000. So that's $300,000 off the top.
She sounds very convincing.
Minus $300,000. That's a 2% increase before the contracts. So those are the types, so I think, so there is a way to get to, I'm not sure what your number is, but a better view, I think, as we just move through our process. But I would say right now, the easiest thing for us to say is we're on the elements outside of the operating budget, I think you would have probably most of the support saying we wouldn't fund the special education trust and we wouldn't put $200,000 into that expendable trust. We might not, we might go back to putting something like 50 or something like that. But, and I don't think we've ever put forward a budget where we've said there's no inflationary adjustment on $7.5 million of the budget. So, or no inflation factor on $15 million of the budget, because we recognize NHRS is going up significantly. There's additional special education services, and we recognize that there's a GMR impact. So I'm comfortable with a 0% multiplier, and that would result in $160,000 that needs to come off the operating budget itself.
And this isn't the first time we've had the conversation about our multiplier and then looking at the totality of it and saying it's too high.
Well, I've just reduced it to 0.
I meant the overall budget.
There is no multiplier.
This isn't the first time we've had the conversation that in totality it was too high. No
Which
matter
is
what
too high, just the increase, it's the net increase?
The net budget.
Okay,
We've had this conversation before, it's not the first time. So we'll see where the superintendent comes back with and go from there, but.
I think and I appreciate the perspective, and I hope I don't appear to be argumentative, because that's not my intention. But if, in moving to a process like this that utilizes an analytical approach to how we get to guidance, I think we've been able to resolve and manage the budget effectively and put together budgets that in some years are as high as 5 to 7% and in other years are under 2% because of this process. And I don't want to risk, after all the years we've put into developing this process, appearing arbitrary by saying it just needs to be lower.
I don't want to be arbitrary either. I also don't want to be Chicago. And so these costs that we can't control are real costs, and there's a consequence to them. And as long as everybody understands there's a consequence, it may be that we have to have less services.
But I think the items that she mentioned appear to be substantial, and is process and analytical data-driven approach, and is probably somewhat easier to substantiate and propose, rather than just taking a number out of the air.
Well, it's easier to substantiate, especially if the formulaic result is 3.5% plus the labor contract, and it's 5%, and that's formulaic, and we all agree to that. It's pretty easy. But in totality, it's too high.
Right.
That's my only point.
So I would be in favor of a 0% CPI, and the other measures that we just discussed, perhaps not funding the SPED trust fund, and perhaps not putting as much in the maintenance trust either.
But that's up to the superintendent's office to figure out.
Yeah, right, but those are the kinds of things that I would
But that is a
support.
good way to offset the increase in the
Right.
benefit.
Absolutely.
To not pull that money,
So
to
by
not have to
not-
take it from general ed. I mean, that's the whole problem, is every time we cut, it's coming from general ed, and that, those students are the ones that end up suffering. Or the buildings, maintenance suffers.
Right.
I mean, it's only two really things that, that you can cut from when you start looking at the line items and everything. And we've talked about the maintenance, just keep kicking it down down the road, and it's gonna come back to bite us. It's just not sustainable to continue to just keep kicking it down the road.
We recently, in any recent years, gone into the contingency funds? That $100,000?
No, not, I don't recall doing
Because
that.
that might be another thing too, where that could be reduced.
Yeah.
That's
There
not
is
something
the-
I would support, because we have a limited retained fund balance, and we have a uncertain, educational model
Right,
and we don't get a lot of additional funding.
yeah, I agree.
But
That's
those are-
like a
But
guaranteed.
those are
Yeah.
additional
Yes.
conversations.
I mean,
and
those are
ways to
the
consider.
things we have some control over.
Mhm.
So.
So I say again, aren't we finished now? And
I would need a motion.
I don't mean to be a
We-
jerk,
no,
but let me be a
So what
jerk.
we typically do for October is set preliminary guidance. So
Yes.
if someone were to make a motion
Just
to
said it.
apply a 0% multiplier to the budget, and which results in an guidance operating budget of $24,315,329, that would represent a gap that would need to be closed of about $159,233. So if someone were to make a motion
So we
like
have to,
that,
so we have to make a motion on each one of these
no,
proposals?
you would need to make a motion that the preliminary guidance the multiplier to set preliminary guidance be set at 0%, which yields a guidance warrant article operating budget of $24,315,329. If someone were to say so moved,
So moved.
the motion would be made. Thank
So
you,
moved.
Raul. Motion by
second.
Raul,
I'll second.
seconded by Matt.
And so, where in that does the contracts come in?
After that. We could make a secondary motion, another motion after this that addresses those other items. If that's where you're going, or, you put your mask on now, I can't tell.
Well, where I'm going is that motion is fine. But if the contracts come in, just to be ridiculous, if they come in with a 6% increase, then
And
that's not
why-
acceptable.
And that's why this is preliminary guidance, and it gives a direction. And we come back in November, when we still don't know about the CBA, but we have a better sense of the budget. And perhaps make an adjustment.
Based on the totality. Okay.
So one other question, just on the other items we talked about, where we could save some cost. Those are items that Andy and you will come back with and suggest perhaps. That's round 2 or 3 or 4.
We could take a motion at this point to make those suggestions and make those cuts and those movements, but anyone can make the motion. I would like Kelly to just get answered the issue with the expendable trust. That might, it might eliminate all 67,000 of it.
Yep.
And then we know, and then that would go just because we were able to investigate with the DRA and figure out what we need to do.
Right.
And so we don't need a motion to direct that, we could just ask Kelly to look at that. And then, once we know, we could make a motion. Similarly with the maintenance trust, in closing the $160,000 gap, some of the maintenance items might come
Absolutely.
off the list, which then closes a gap on top, and then also potentially closes a gap, closes something on the bottom. So
Absolutely.
I would prefer to look at those outside elements next month, when we have a better view of the budget.
I agree, not only that, but we can have a discussion of prioritization, you know.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I just want to throw out one other thing, because, and Cindy can jump in on this at any time, but the school board has been talking about bonding some of the items that are in the maintenance trust. And even if it was a very small number, like maybe 1.5 million, something like that, and maybe doing 2 phases of the roof and more paving or something like that. So not that you have to discuss it tonight or you have to have any answers, but Andy wanted me to throw that out to you guys as a point of discussion.
Okay, so to that point, the bond threshold has changed as a result of House Bill 1558, which was like an omnibus bill, and so now the threshold to pass a bond is a 60%, it's a 3/5 majority, whether you're SB2 or not. So we no longer have the 67% threshold.
Not only that, but
And bond rates are extremely low.
given that this day and age the interest rates are so low, it might be a good idea to maybe do that instead of
Okay.
paying over many years in terms of the actual
So that's
from the
similar
actual
to,
operating budget.
that's similar to what Hollis did last year with
In a lot of things, yes.
a lot of things.
My immediate response to that is positive.
Oh, great.
My gut feels positive too.
I'm still ready to go home, but
So if our
Okay, let's go.
discussion is concluded,
that may be my last positive.
if our discussion
I'm with you.
on the motion is concluded, we can take a vote. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to set the guidance multiplier at 0, the preliminary guidance multiplier at 0, which yields the 329 operating budget, please vote yes.
Yes.
Those opposed? Okay, 1, 2,
I just don't know what it's gonna do to the budget until I talk to Andy.
5, 1, 0. Okay, I would just like to make one mention of, I wanted to mention it when Kelly was doing results, that the food, we were offering free lunches was until the end of the year, the end of the school year. That's been extended to the end, that was the end of the December 31st. It's been extended to the end of the year. So the kids
You
are
mean the
getting-
end of the school year?
End of the school year, so the kids are getting free lunches. So-
Good.
However, the downside of that is getting the free and reduced applications in,
Yes.
because everything is decided on free and reduced
Yes,
applications.
including a portion of adequacy aid.
Yes.
And so now that everyone's getting lunch for free, people aren't turning
We
in
don't
the
need to do
forms,
that.
which is a problem. So I just also want to mention, because I know someone's going to make a motion to adjourn, that our fourth Thursday meeting falls on Thanksgiving, and while I know nobody is traveling, I know that no one wants to have turkey dinner with each other and discuss the budget. So my proposal is to go with the third Thursday of November, which is the 19th.
Works for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll go with the meeting on the 19th. With
Good.
that, process observer, Tom Enright is going to leave before we can vote. So-
We did
I'll make a
very
motion
well.
to adjourn.
Tom thought that we waited too long to
Oh.
set the guidance because we just sat and looked at each other, but other than that, we did very well, and we're still out at 8 o'clock.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Enright. Seconded by Lauren. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.